Hello, my name's Michael Lower, and this is a very brief podcast about my experience of making podcasts to achieve deeper student engagement in my Principles of Hong Kong Land Law course. So the podcasts that I made, that I'm going to describe in a moment, were made to support this Hong Kong Land Law course. This is a JD course for postgraduate students. Some of them are part-time, some of them are full-time, some of them have English as their first language, but most of them don't. As I'm going to explain, I made a variety of types of podcast. Some of them were available to anybody, so they're open access, and others were only available to students who registered for the course. As I've said already, the overall aim was to achieve a deeper level of engagement by the students. And the role that I see podcasts as having with regard to engagement is that they provide a solid platform. They allow students to go back over the basic ideas again and again until they feel comfortable with them. Of course, having that solid platform is a necessary precondition for any kind of deeper engagement. In this second slide, which says that audio only, 10 to 15 minutes, the point here is that the first type of podcast that I produced was a series of 12 or 13 short 10 to 15 minute audio-only podcasts. And they were made in a professional studio of ITSC. And they were then distributed via CUHK's podcast station, podcast.wmv.edu.hk. Each of these podcasts was just an introduction to the topic that we would be covering each week. It wasn't a full lecture. But this next slide talks about audio and PowerPoint slides. What I found was that students prefer not to have a pure audio file, but an audio embedded in PowerPoint slides. Perhaps that helps them to focus on what's being said. And this type of podcast came in several versions. The first ones were just those introductory weekly introductions, but later on I added further podcasts which were basically full lectures, either a single half-hour, 35-minute podcast for that week, or a full lecture broken down into shorter segments. As this slide explains, I also produced a series of podcasts that recapped the discussion of the problem question that we'd had in class. So the way that land law and many other law subjects are taught in Hong Kong and in the common law world in general is by discussion of a hypothetical problem. So I would pose the problem a week before the relevant class, and then in class we would discuss the answer. And then I recorded the main ideas from that discussion in a podcast. It was a podcast audio embedded in PowerPoint slides. This next slide talks about the possible use of podcasts for visiting speakers or for interviews. I never did this, but I do think that it would be a way to build up a useful and rich bank of materials for students. If one were to have podcasts, sound recordings of interviews with visiting experts or of talks by visiting experts. This next slide shows the Moodle page for my course. It's the first Moodle page. This is the page that you would see when you first logged into the Hong Kong Land Law Moodle site. So all of the materials that I made, written and these podcasts, are all available to registered students through this Moodle site. This next slide shows what would happen if you were to click on one of the links. So on the first page is dominated just by a series of links, each link referring just to the topic for that week. But click on any of those links and it would take you to another page that looks like the one you see here. And this page explains the topic for that week, it explains the readings to be done, and then it has links to all of the resources, the written seminar guides as well as the podcasts. This slide is the very first slide of the very first podcast that I ever made. That podcast was a 5-minute introduction to the whole course that told students a bit about the course, about me, about textbooks, about assessment, and so on.
Hello, I'm Michael Lower, an Associate Professor in the Faculty of Law at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and the course convener of Principles of Land Law. I've made this very brief podcast to give you information that I hope will help you to decide whether or not to do the course and to help you to get ready for the course.
This slide just shows you the web page for the CUHK podcast station. The URL is podcast.cuhk.edu.hk, and the top left item there is my Principles of Land Law series, and you'll see there are 3 buttons. One just allows you to listen to each podcast from that page. The middle button allows you to subscribe to the podcast series through a RSS feed, and the right-hand button it allows you to subscribe to the RSS feed through iTunes. If you were to do that, then of course your iTunes software would automatically capture all of the episodes in this series of podcasts. And this final slide just shows you what how iTunes captures the episodes. So you can see here the list of episodes of my Land Law podcasts on my iTunes page.